Well, hey guys, today we are continuing with our series called Your Joy is Invalid, where we are digging into what true joy is, how we can find it, how we can foster it and steward it well in our lives. Now, last week, as we began this discussion, we dug into where true joy is found. And joy is found in the presence of God, right? We can't manufacture it. It's not something that we can create. It is a fruit of the Spirit that lives in each of us if we have believed in Jesus. And so if you missed that, I encourage you to go back and check it out. But even if you did, you can jump in right here too, because our discussion today is significant, even if you didn't watch last week. And so I want to kick us off with a story that makes me pretty mad, and I think will make you pretty mad too. And so a few years ago, I was asked to judge a chili cook-off, which is absolutely hilarious because I am completely unqualified for this task. I have no idea why I was chosen, right? Like the only qualification that I have is the fact that I own my very own set of taste buds, right? That's it. That's where the qualifications end. And so as I'm getting ready to judge this cook-off, everyone is bringing in their chili and they're putting it up on this counter. And a woman walks in, an older woman, and she has a young man with her. I think it was her grandson who was carrying this enormous metal pot of chili. It was bigger than the kid that was carrying it. And she brings it and they set it up on the counter. And I look at her and I say, wow, that is a big pot. Like, hey, tell me about your chili. And she lights up. It was incredible how much she lit up. And she told me all about this chili that she made, how it was her grandmother's recipe that she had perfected over time, how her and her family gathered together around the holiday season and make it together, something that they all look forward to. And she was just beaming and full of joy as she shared this with me. And while she was talking, a man came up over my shoulder and kind of interrupted her very gruffly and said, "Does it have beans in it?" To which she excitedly responded. She says, "Oh yes, I start soaking the beans 3 days in advance." And he cuts her off again. And he says, "If it has beans in it, it's not chili." And I watched as this sweet woman, her shoulders slumped. And I watched her just look defeated and confused because somebody would come up and just invalidate her joy right there in that moment. Now, I'm pretty sure the Spirit was really, really involved and holding me back in this moment because I can't remember exactly what I said, but I know that I still had a job the next day. This cook-off was at the church where I worked. And so I'm pretty sure I held back in that moment. There were all kinds of things that I wanted to say, maybe some creative things you would have wanted to say too. And if you're somebody who doesn't believe that chili should have beans in it, keep it to yourself. Don't comment, leave it, just hold it in, all right? But in this moment, like, why would you come up and just invalidate somebody's joy? And this is what we're talking about in this series. We're talking about how, if you're a follower of Jesus, how you and I are called to a different kind of joy, a joy that the world around us doesn't fully understand very often, and a kind of joy that those around us may try to invalidate. And so it is so critical that we understand what true joy is and how to protect it in our lives. And so today, I want us to talk about joy through the lens of community. And so the joy, right, we talked about comes from the presence of God. But I want to share with you something really cool that John, who was a disciple of Jesus, shares with us in Scripture. So let me give you some background. John, he was, like I said, a disciple of Jesus. He was an eyewitness to the life of Jesus, right? He had a front row seat. And the really cool thing about how John writes is that he always clearly tells us why he is writing what he's writing. Which sometimes in Scripture, it can be a little bit confusing because we don't fully understand why someone is writing what they're writing and the perspective that they're coming from. It takes a little bit of mental gymnastics to think through, okay, why did you write this? And what did this mean for them then? What does it mean for me now? How do I apply it? Like, there can be a couple more steps. But John is pretty clear. When he writes his gospel, his account of the life of Jesus, he tells us, he writes from his perspective so that we can see and experience what it is that he saw and experienced, so that we can come to believe in Jesus too. And so we're going to jump into a letter that John wrote that you can find kind of later in the New Testament, the Christian scriptures. And just like he does in his gospel account, John tells us up front why he's writing what he's writing. And so this is in 1 John, and I'm going to read you verses 3 and 4. This is what he says. We proclaim to you what we ourselves have actually seen and heard, so that you may have fellowship with us, relationship with us, community with us, right? So that you can have fellowship with us. And our fellowship is with the Father and with his Son, Jesus Christ. We are writing these things so that you may fully share our joy. Right? Often, what you'll see when it talks about this verse, you'll also see, or sometimes it'll say your joy, not our joy. In other instances, you'll see something that reads something like you can experience the fullness of joy, right? From being in community with God and with one another. And I think this is so very cool, because think about fullness, right? Think about a cup that is so full, maybe it's even overflowing. Right? Joy is so significant in our lives, and don't we want a joy that is just overflowing? How cool is that? And John is showing us that we can experience a fullness of joy, not just in the presence of God, but also in fellowship and relationship with one another. And this is something that we really need to pay attention to. Because I don't know if you've noticed this, but relationships can be really difficult. We are all imperfect people, and so often we make decisions that do not have someone else's feelings or well-beings in mind. Right? We can say flippant things. Other people can say things that hurt our feelings. Relationships are fractured. Boundaries have to go in place. Good boundaries have to go into place very often. Right? Being in great community and great fellowship, having great relationships can be really, really difficult. And so when we hold this up and we see that we can experience a fullness of joy in God's presence and also in fellowship with others, it needs to make us think about how we can foster those great relationships in our lives. Right? When he's asked what the greatest commandment is, he says that we are to love God and to love others the way that we love ourselves. And this way, in the way that we love others, we can show people who Jesus is and what he has done in our lives. We can show them the presence of the Spirit living in us and the fruit that can come from that. We talked about that last week, right? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, self-control. I'm missing one. I always skip one, all right? But we can show others who Jesus is through our actions and through the ways that we love one another. We can experience a fullness of joy and community with one another as we love others the way that Jesus has loved us. When we make the choice not to invalidate other people's joy, but we find ways to be in community and to have life-giving relationships with one another. Scripture calls us to rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn. Right? That community is so very important. And so I'm not going to talk for a long time today, because I think our time is going to be better spent getting out there and really fostering great relationships. All right, I'm going to challenge you as we end this video and our time together today to think of a way that you can foster a relationship today in a way that will show them Jesus' love in you, show them the grace that has been extended to you. And in that, you can experience the fullness of joy that comes from knowing God and being in great relationship with others. And so, right now, I want you to think of some ways that you can remove some barriers, perhaps that you've built. Some resentments that have built walls between you and the people that you're in relationship with. And I want to encourage you to go and to patch those as best you can. If it's appropriate, we need to have good boundaries, right? Send the message, make the call, make the apology so that we can experience the fullness of joy that comes with knowing God and being in great relationship with one another. So find somebody to share joy with today. Joy in God's presence, is real. And I hope that you have experienced that kind of joy in your life, experienced that joy that comes from being in God's presence, right? Because when we seek Him, we find Him. But that joy is amplified in community. And so get out there today and get into fellowship with somebody else so you can experience that fullness of joy and you can gift it to them as well.